There once lived a husband and wife who longed to have a child, but they longed in vain for quite some time. At last, however, the wife noticed unmistakable signs that her wish was granted. Now, in the wall of the house there was a little window that overlooked a magnificent garden full of every kind of fruit and vegetable. There was a high wall around that garden and no one dared to go into it because it was the property of a very powerful witch who was feared by everyone. One day, the woman was standing at that window and she saw a bed of lettuce, or Rapunzel as it's called. It looked so fresh and so green that she longed to taste some. And this longing grew stronger every day so that eventually she became really sick. Her husband was alarmed at her condition and he said, "My dear wife, what is the matter?" She replied, "Oh, if I cannot have any of that Rapunzel in the garden behind our house, I'll die." The man loved his wife dearly and he thought, rather than let her die, I must get her some of that Rapunzel. I don't care what it costs. So as night was falling, he climbed over the high wall and got into the witch's garden, where he pulled up a handful of Rapunzel. He scrambled back hastily and took it to his wife, who made it into a salad at once and ate it hungrily. It tasted good. In fact, it tasted so good that her desire for it grew stronger and stronger, and she begged her husband to go and get some more. So once again, just as it was getting dark, he set off and climbed that wall. But when he set foot on the ground to get the Rapunzel, he had a shock. For there was the witch standing in front of him. "So you are the wretch who has been stealing my Rapunzel," she said, glaring at him. "You will pay for this. Let me tell you." "That's fair," said the man. "I can't argue with that, but let me plead for mercy. I had to do this. My wife saw your Rapunzel from our window up there and she felt a craving. You know how it is. It was so strong she thought she might die if she could not have some, so I had no choice." The witch understood the reason. The anger went out of her expression and she nodded. "I see," she said. "Well, if that's the case, you can have as much as Rapunzel as you want. But there is a condition. The child your wife is bearing shall belong to me. It will be perfectly safe. I shall look after it like a mother." In his fear, the man agreed to this and hurried back home with the Rapunzel. And when in due course the wife gave birth, the witch appeared by her bed and took up the little girl in her arms. "I named this child Rapunzel," she said, and vanished with her. Rapunzel grew up to become the most beautiful child the sun had ever shone on. When she was 12 years old, the witch took her into the depth of the forest and shut her in a tower that had no door, no stairs, and no windows except one very small in a room right at the top. When the witch wanted to go in, she would call, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." Rapunzel had a beautiful strong hair as fine as spun gold. When she heard the witch calling, she untied her hair and fastened it around the window hook before letting it down its full length all the way to the ground, whereupon the witch climbed up it to her little room. After she had been in the tower for some years, it happened that the king's son was riding through that forest. As he came near the tower, he heard a song so lovely that he had to stop and listen to it. Of course, it was the lonely Rapunzel singing to pass time, and she had a sweet, deep voice. The prince wanted to go up to her, but there was no door to be found. He was baffled, and he rode home determined to come again and see if there was another way to get up the tower. Next day, he came back, but with no more success. Such a beautiful song, and no singer to be seen. But while he was pondering, he heard someone coming, and he hid behind a tree. It was the witch. When she was at the base of the tower, the prince heard her call out, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, lay down your hair." To his astonishment, down from the window trembled a length of golden hair. The witch seized hold and climbed all the way up and got into the window. "Well," thought the prince, "if that's the style coming up, I'll try my luck with it." So the following day, as darkness was falling, he went to the tower and called out, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, lay down your hair." Down came the hair, and the prince took it and climbed up and jumped into the window. At first, Rapunzel was terrified. She had never seen a man before. He was nothing like the witch, so he was strange and unfamiliar to her, but he was so handsome that she was confused and did not know what to say. However, the prince is never lost for words, and he begged her not to be frightened. He explained how he heard her lovely voice singing from the tower, and now he cannot rest until he found the singer. But now that he has seen her, he realized that her soul is more beautiful than her voice. Rapunzel was charmed by this and soon lost her fear. Instead, she felt delight in the young prince's presence and eagerly agreed to let him visit her again. Before many days had gone, their friendship had developed into love, and when the prince asked her to marry him, Rapunzel consented at once. For the witch, she suspected nothing at first. But one day Rapunzel said to her, "You know, it's funny, but my clothes don't longer fit me. Every dress I have is too tight." The witch knew at once what that meant. "You wicked girl," she said. "You have deceived me all this time. You have been entertaining a lover, and now we see the consequences. Well, I shall put an end to that." So she took in her hand her hair with some scissors and snip snap, and down fell the hair on the floor, the hair that the prince had climbed up. The witch then transported Rapunzel by magic to a wild, far place. There, the poor young woman suffered greatly, and after a few months gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl. They lived poor. They had no money, no home, and only what they could beg from are passers-by who heard Rapunzel sing. They were often hungry. In the winter, they nearly perished of the cold, and in the summer, they were scorched by the burning sun. Back to the tower. On the evening of the day when Rapunzel's hair was cut off, the prince came to the tower as usual and called, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, lay down your hair." The witch, however, was there lying in wait. She had tied Rapunzel's hair to the window hook, and when she heard him call, she threw it down as the girl had done before. The prince climbed up, but instead of his beloved Rapunzel, at the window he found an ugly old witch, demented with anger, whose eyes flashed with fury as she railed at him. "You are a fancy boy, are you? You worm your way into the tower. You worm your way into her heart. You worm your way into her bed. You leech, you lizard, you human, you... Well, the bird's not in her nest anymore. The cat got her. What do you think of that? And the cat will scratch your pretty eyes out too before she's finished. Rapunzel is gone. Do you understand? You will never see her again. And the witch forced the prince backwards and backwards until he fell out of the window. A thorn bush broke his fall, but at a terrible cost of piercing his eyes. Blinded in body and broken in spirit, the prince wandered away. He lived as a beggar for some time, not knowing which country he was in. But one day he heard a familiar voice, a voice that he loved, and stumbled towards it. And as he did so, he heard two more voices joining in. The voices of children. And suddenly they stopped singing, for the mother Rapunzel had recognized the prince and was running towards him. They embraced, both of them crying with joy. And then two of Rapunzel's tears fell into the prince's eyes, and his vision became clear once more. He saw his dear Rapunzel, and he saw his two children for the first time. So they reunited and traveled back to the prince's kingdom, where they lived happily ever after.